My name is Richard Hitt. I'm the president of the Middle Tennessee Wildwoods chapter. Welcome to our June meeting. And by the way, happy Pollinator Week. All week, so go out and enjoy the pollinators. Make sure you got the right plants for them and let us know how it turns out. I don't have any other announcements other than I'm glad we can at least meet in this fashion. And I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, so it's actually working out well for me to be able to have the Zoom meeting set up. Otherwise, I'd be missing this. We will continue to meet by Zoom on a month-by-month basis until the board feels it's safe and enough people are interested in meeting physically. And there's no way to know when that's going to be at this point. So let me welcome Jeremy French. We were delighted to have Jeremy as our speaker tonight. Jeremy is a partner wildlife biologist with Quail Forever, American Bird Conservancy, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, working on conserving grasslands and grassland species in 30 counties in Tennessee through a regional conservation partnership farm bill program. Jeremy has spent a majority of his life in grassland ecosystems, whether it was growing up in the wet prairies of the Everglades in South Florida or conducting research on bison and their effect on herpetofauna populations in the tall grass prairies of the Great Plains, or helping create short grass prairie habitat in Wyoming. Jeremy specializes in reptiles and amphibians, but is passionate about all grassland species, especially bison. In Jeremy's free time, he likes to hunt, fish, hike, trap, and camp with his fiancée, Callie. Jeremy is also an amateur photographer who enjoys capturing nature's beauty through the lens of his camera. So welcome, Jeremy, and let's turn the meeting over to you and you can take over.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So like Richard said, I appreciate you guys inviting me to talk. My name's Jeremy. I've spent a lot of my life, even before I knew it, in grassland ecosystems growing up in South Florida. And I hope I can share some good information, about the different ecosystems, different grassland types, some of the conservation going on, not only in Tennessee, but in Kentucky, some different challenges we're facing, and some things that I think we're doing right as well, and some different ways that everybody sitting at home can help out or reach out. The overview of my talk, we'll go through a little bit of, what were these historic grasslands specifically in the Mid-South, so Tennessee, Kentucky, a little bit of Alabama, where'd they go, how can we address losing them and what we've lost with them. And I'll kind of hit a lot of information and, I don't want to take too long today. So if we can hold our questions to the end, I always love questions, write them down if something, piques your interest, and feel free to ask them at the end. And then I'll also share my contact information. So if a week from now you're driving somewhere, I know this always happens to me, and some thought or question pops into your head, feel free to email me, text me, call me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or I had this idea. And I'm always looking to hear from people that are passionate about habitat.
So please enter your questions in the chat window, and then we'll have them all written down for everybody to see at the end of the talk.
Awesome. So if you haven't yet, I highly suggest going out and purchasing this book from Reed Noss called The Forgotten Grasslands of the South. And this book kind of gives us a picture of what grasslands in the South historically were, and where they were, and some of the species that would have resided in them. And a lot of people, when you talk about grasslands, they think of the same thing I thought of when I was doing all my undergrad work. I thought of the Great Plains. I thought of the Midwest, sprawling prairies with bison herds in the millions historically. And the grasslands of the Southeast weren't exactly that, but they were extremely biodiverse and important, even more biodiverse than the Great Plains. And they were even biodiverse, and we have many different types of grasslands. So of course we have your traditional prairies and savannas which are what I did a lot of my work in, working with bison. But then we have things here that, you know, I was very fortunate to move down to Tennessee and see, like your grassland balds. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been down to the balds in the Smoky, but just amazing. We have these really short grass prairie glades and barrens. And then we have some wetter things like fens, bogs, marshes, and then really cool stuff called river scour, which I'm just getting the chance to really dive deep and doing some exploring in the Mid-South. But all of these, by Reed Noss's definition, and our definition with SGI and the RCPP we're working with, are grasslands. You know, some of them are treated grasslands, some of them are just entirely treeless and shrubless, and there's all type of mixes. But identifying these ecosystems as grasslands helps us very much in not only the management, but the research that we can do and how we approach restoring these habitats. So a lot of people ask me, you know, well, where were they? Obviously, there's parts of Tennessee and Kentucky that would have been, you know, traditionally hardwood, historically hardwood forest, but these grasslands were everywhere. So I know Dwayne's in the chat tonight, but so this is a map that SGI started about 4 years ago, mapping the grasslands of the Mid-South. Now this map is 4 years old. We've since expanded upon this map, but when you're looking at it, everything in that beigeish yellow was historically some form of grassland, from the Pennyroyal Plain, which is the largest continuous one that stretches from Kentucky down into Tennessee, which is this vast, immense prairie that when early botanists came to the area, they talked about the flowers and the wild strawberries being so dense that when they rode their horses across this prairie, it stained the belly of these horses red. You know, just very vast grasslands. And then we've got more of our savannas and barrens in the Nashville Basin, and you have the Piedmont prairies out towards the east and the Black Belt prairies down in Mississippi, Alabama, and then in West Tennessee, even more traditional prairies. So large parts, you know, of Tennessee and Kentucky were historically grasslands. And I know that when I grew up in the South, you know, even in South Florida, that wasn't ever conveyed to me. Even when I was doing my undergrad work in Iowa, part of the Midwest, that was never really conveyed to me. So much so that when I applied to be a grassland biologist, I was kind of thrown by the fact that my position would be in Tennessee, just north of Nashville, covering 30 counties. And I applied because I love grasslands, and I have absorbed every ounce of information since moving down here. But these grasslands historically were very vast, extremely biodiverse, and extremely important. So a lot of people ask, you know, what did these grasslands look like, or what happened to them? Where'd they go? Because we don't see a lot of them today, or we don't see them in the way that they would have been in all their grandeur. So that's somewhat simple, unfortunately. A lot of your traditional prairies, your arable lands, were converted to crop fields, tobacco, corn, soybean, because they were the most fertile soil. The same thing you see happening in the Midwest, where it is the corn belt of the country. It is because these prairies created the most, excuse me, the best soil there. You know, and then we have savanna succeeded to forest. Basically, fire was removed from these landscapes. We took, you know, basically thousands of years of evolution that these prairies and grasslands evolved with, and we removed that, along with the large grazers from the historic prairies and savannas. So they succeeded to forests, you know, or sometimes they're just shrub thickets or sumac thickets, or, you know, you never know. But the point is they succeeded to woody vegetation in a lot of cases. You know, and I always get the question, well, you know, why should we care? And that's generally a good question. It's a very deep question that you can't answer it in just one hit, you know? So I always like to highlight, you know, what are we truly losing with these grassland ecosystems in the South? And I love this slide. I actually stole this slide from Dwayne. It's very deep and important to me. We're losing, hundreds of thousands of years of history and cultural importance. The lack of education around grasslands and how important they were, to early settlers or Native Americans in this country is really disheartening for me. It truly saddens me because, I love these grasslands. I'm very passionate about these grasslands. And if you ever get the chance to work and see the biodiversity of these areas and kind of read, and, I'm a big history buff, the history of how these grasslands were managed and how they helped build this country into what it is today, it's astonishing. And it's very sad that we've lost that. A big thing is economics, and people have a hard time understanding or thinking about that. But in Kentucky and Tennessee, used to have these massive quail populations. This beautiful, storied grassland bird that people would come from all over to hunt. They would buy, bird dogs out of Tennessee. They'd stay, in hotels in Tennessee. They'd buy hunting licenses and all this. They'd come here because we had these great populations. Anymore, it's rare to even see a quail. I get very lucky in the work that I do that the landowners that have quail often chase me down and say, you've got to come out here and look at this. But most people that I know, and like my bio said, I'm a big time hunter and fisherman. I consider myself an all around outdoorsman. Don't even own a bird dog anymore. There's no more market, because unless you can afford paying $1,000 to get onto a game ranch, there's no quail hunting for the most part in Tennessee or Kentucky. There's a couple of pockets that the really hardcore guys go out and, chase that history and that bird. But I talk to old timers all the time. 40 years ago, they were everywhere. We had them in great abundance. The next thing is services. That is something I went to school in Iowa. I know all about corn and farming and agriculture. And something that I got to help out on while I was in Iowa and see the benefits from is the benefits of how much prairie buffer strips in agricultural practice in an agricultural field can benefit soil erosion. And the Iowa State University did the math. And if you set aside 7% of your acreage in prairie buffer strips and use it strategically, you can reduce the soil erosion off of your farm and field by 90%. And I know a lot of farmers, they care about their soil, because if you don't have any more soil, you can't pass that down to the next generation. Your farm goes only as far as the soil and the land does. And if we're able to reduce those soil erosion costs and reduce the amount of nitrogen and stuff like that we have to put into the field, not only does it increase the return for the farmer, it increases the return for us, the outdoorsman, because it keeps more runoff out of the water. It keeps, more nitrogen in the field, and we're able to create habitat while doing all that. So it's really important, and something that I'm very passionate about is working within these agricultural, operations to really maximize their benefit while maximizing our benefit, both ecologically and for the land. And to further that, I was very surprised when I moved down to Tennessee, because I did a lot of my work in the Midwest all the way out to Kansas and into Wyoming. And when you are west of the Mississippi, most big grazing operations are done on native grasses. They're done on your andropogons, on big blue stem and little blue stem and switchgrass mixes. When you come into Tennessee and to a lot of the South, unfortunately, a lot of grazing operations run purely fescue. And some of the biggest cattle producing states, are west of the Mississippi. And using nature to the advantage, being able to create some habitat and profit off that, it kind of scratches each other's back. It's good for everybody. No one's going to be upset about having more habitat, specifically grassland bird habitat, but it also allows for bigger rate of return on those cows. And then kind of the scariest thing that we're losing with these grassland, more scary to me than the other three combined, is biodiversity. We're losing species at such an alarming rate that it keeps me up at night. and I don't say that to be, colloquial or anything like that. I mean, it literally keeps me up at night. Sometimes I'm laying at bed at 2, 3 in the morning thinking like, some of these plant species are barely holding on. There's 2 or 3 plants left, and one bad day on a sprayer, boom, they're gone. And, we're talking about ecological collapse on a broad scale. So about 9 months ago, a paper came out that in the past 50 years, our lifetime, we have lost more than 50% of grassland bird species. And that's even hard for me to truly understand and fathom, because 50% seems like an insane number, but it's true. And when we look at historically other animals that this has happened to with the loss of fire or overhunting or whatever it may be, we can look no further than the great American bison. To me, my favorite mammal, hands down, amazing animal. Bison would have been historically present all throughout the Mid-South and into the South. They wouldn't have had the herds in the 100,000s like the Great Plains had, but they would definitely had significant herds that altered ecosystems and maintained grasslands, and were used extensively by Native American and early settlers. Remind me tomorrow. Sorry, my computer wanted to update in the middle of this. No, thank you. Were used for various uses. For early settlers and Native Americans, from their horns to their hides to their brains to their meat. It was a very pivotal animal in creating what we are today, in America. We lost billions with a B in grass and birds across the continent. And then you look at things like reptiles, which are my specialty. 1 out of every 3 reptiles is endangered or vulnerable today. The majority of reptiles are grassland species. They need the sun. They need that open area. It's hard for them to subsist in a closed-in canopy. And the list goes on and on to mice and field mice and other grassland birds and bugs and plants. We're losing plants that we haven't even truly just been able to discover or describe in these grassland ecosystems, especially in the South, which are the most diverse ecosystems in the country. Our grasslands in the Southeast are more diverse, probably tenfold, than the grasslands of the Great Plains. And we have less than 1% of those grasslands left within the Southeast. So I try not to be all doom and gloom. It's hard at times, but it's important to leave you more than with, oh my God, we're losing all these things. What can we do? How can everybody help? Not just the biologists like me, but the people who are sitting at home who care. The first thing that I'm always going to advocate on behalf of is go to your local NRCS office, contact a wildlife biologist like myself, and see what farm bill programs there are that you may be able to enroll in to receive cost share to create some habitat on your property. Now, maybe you only have a 1 acre backyard, or maybe you have 30 acres of an old fallow field and anything in between. I work a lot of programs, anything from a ½ acre up to 70 acres or hundreds and more. So don't think, oh my God, my property is too small. We can definitely find a way to make conservation and grassland conservation work on your property. But maybe you don't have that. Maybe you live in the city and all you have is, a garden flower bed in your front yard. Planting backyard pollinator gardens helps extensively with invertebrate populations, from monarchs to other butterflies to moths and dragonflies and even birds at times. you know, it gets a little bit harder without having the real size there, but it definitely makes an impact. And maybe you don't have that. Maybe you're like me and you're still renting your house, although I talked my landlord into letting me plant a prairie in our front yard. Don't ask me how, but it happened. You can always get involved. SGI is always looking for more volunteers to do habitat work, to do, you know, help out with documenting roadside remnants, and tons of stuff always going on. I can't even begin to speak about the extensive amount of opportunities there are to get involved and impact your local habitat, because it's just so extensive. We have plenty of people at SGI working all types of programs. There's a lot of Jeremy Frenches at SGI that just never stop, and all they do is eat, drink, sleep, grassland habitat. So to talk a little bit about our Farm Bill programs, you can't get out of here without hearing it. That's what pays the bill for me. So I run the program in Tennessee across those 30 counties within the Farm Bill program. And then we have another biologist in Kentucky by the name of Megan Hart that covers a lot of, I think it's like 70 counties in Kentucky. And we're all overseen by one boss, Brittany Byers, and we work within that whole contract of SGI, Quail Forever, and American Bird Conservancy and NRCS. The goals of this Farm Bill program is to restore grassland ecosystems that covered a lot of Tennessee and Kentucky. It specifically focuses on 3 grassland birds, because what we've learned is, one, obviously these birds are very important to us, but if you go to the most people and try and talk about plant conservation, it gets very tough at times. But we've learned that going and talking about how if we can conserve these grassland communities and these plant communities, you can have bobwhite quail and Henslow sparrows and meadowlarks and all these wonderful birds, and you can have better hunting opportunities for turkey and deer. A lot more people jump on to the bandwagon. And overall, our goal is to do things like this. It's to educate landowners, it's to assist landowners, it's to reach out to people, and at the end of the day, teach them that these grasslands, not only did they exist across Tennessee and Kentucky and the entire Southeast, but they still do, and we can save a lot of them. Because a lot of these areas can either be restored or they just need fire or return back to the landscape to really bring them back strong. And like I said, I try not to be all doom and gloom. We started this project a year and 3 weeks ago. I moved down to Tennessee. I left everything in Wyoming, told my fiance, let's go live north of Nashville, and let's make a difference. So in Tennessee in 2019, we contracted over 300 acres of grassland habitat to be restored, recreated, or enrolled in conservation cost share programs. And that's only on the contract side. We have tons of acreage where I'm going to landowners and they tell me, hey, I don't want money for this. I just want to do what's right. Make me a management plan. Help me manage this. Help me set up a burn plans. Help me whatever. And we've done tons and tons and tons of outreach to be able to talk to, well over hundreds and hundreds of landowners to get that information out there. Kentucky started a little bit later after me. I think Megan started maybe 6 months after me. And in a very short period, they're already up to 150 acres of grassland habitat. So 450 acres of habitat have been impacted. That's even more counting the stuff that we can't track as contracts in 1 year. And we're coming up to contract time right now. In the next week, this number will probably double. So we are making a difference. We're making an impact, but we can't make an impact without you guys, without landowners, without more outreach, without making more connections. So that's what that is. We need your guys' help. We need to get this information out there. Not only the education, but the opportunity that we will help you from start to finish, make a management plan to restore grasslands on your property or your neighbor's property, and we will find some type of cost share so that doesn't have to come out of your pocket. And I'll leave you with thank you. Feel free to screenshot this information or write it down. That's my email up there. You're free to have this. Email me anytime. I answer emails 7 days a week. Sometimes I'm a little bit slow on Sundays, but besides that, it's always tied to my personal cell phone. And I will answer any questions from, hey, what plant is this? Or, hey, can you come out to my property next week and make me a management plan? And I'll take any questions if you got them.
Hi, Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Katie, and this is a great presentation. It gets me thinking about areas that are very close to the city that may or may not be considered grasslands, but that feel to me like they're not being managed well. And I have to admit, I don't know what managed well means, except that it's about preservation. But there's a tract of land out near Cornelia Fort Airport that was just, because the airport suffered so much from the flood in 2011, it was gifted, I believe, or purchased by the city of Nashville. It's now part of Shelby Bottoms Park. And the runway is a mile in each direction, and there are these beautiful swaths of land on either side of the runway and then right down the middle that to me look like grasslands, and they're full of milkweed and you name it. And every summer, at least twice that I know of, they just mow the thing down. And I know that there are at least a couple of meadowlarks. I've seen them out there, or I did. And I just have this heartbreaking feeling that their nests probably got just mowed over. I don't know if that's responsible stewardship of the land, but I'm just wondering, how would I get started on asking questions about, is there a better way? Maybe it's the city of Nashville that needs to know there is an alternative. Maybe they're already doing the right thing. I don't know, but it's near and dear to my heart because I ride my bike out there on a regular basis, and it's so beautiful. And then when they mow it down, the deer don't come out at night anymore. The baby fawns don't nestle down in the grass. It's like a wasteland. It just feels so, there's something wrong there, maybe. I don't know, your thoughts on how I could get started on asking questions?
I would start with figuring out who is in charge of the management.
Okay.
And then keep in mind that a lot of time conservation at time isn't always the prettiest. In the absence of fire, mowing can help keep things in a grassland state. Without actually seeing the area, it was hard for me to make any recommendations or say if the mowing is helping or if not. Mowing can definitely be detrimental to some areas, but it can also be very beneficial to some areas as well. But if you wanted to get a better idea of what the goals for how that it manages, how that's being managed or it's going to be managed, I start with finding out who managed it, whether it's Nashville Parks or it's TWRA or whoever it may be.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I got a
Hey,
feeling
Katie.
if those large swaths are near an airport,
We can put the.
I know airports do everything they can to keep birds away. So they even have fake hawks that fly around, and so that's just.
Katie, this is Cooper. I know exactly what you're talking about and have thought the same thing out there. But Brian, just so you know, it's not an active airport right now.
Yeah, long gone.
That's good. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I know that Bell's Bend, they just recently got like an active, or for the first time, like a paid director just pretty recently, I'm pretty sure. So I think she would be the person to get in touch with for like
Okay. I'll
Bell's
start.
Bend or something like that, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Katie, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Barbara Harris. I know a little bit about the Shelby Bottoms situation. That farmer who has the adjacent property, the in-holding, mows it every spring so that he can get fodder for his cows. And I have talked to people about changing the mowing schedule so that it wouldn't be right in the middle of breeding breeding season for the birds. But right now, that's the agreement that is with Metro Parks, and maybe we can get together and do something about that. Metro Parks likes that because they don't have to mow it themselves.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. It would be better if it were mowed in the fall.
Mm. And then there's something that I noticed, and again, I'm not an expert at this, but they start mowing from the inside out, and it chases all the deer and their babies out into the neighborhoods. And my thought is, wait a minute, why don't you start on the perimeter and work in? And it's just like little things like that that could make a huge difference. But anyway, we'll see. I'll just start asking questions and see, yeah, who's mowing it and who's managing it and where we go from here. Maybe it would
The
be
best
enough.
thing would be a fall mowing schedule. That way breeding birds wouldn't be destroyed.
Yeah, especially the ground breeders like the meadowlarks.
Some kind of mowing, I think, is essential to keep it a grassland, but not during the height of the breeding season.
Right.
I guess this is Brian. I guess my question would be, Jeremy, can pretty much Middle Tennessee, can you make anything into a grassland, or is there something specific to the ecosystem that will, it's like you can't create a glade everywhere, but
Right.
what you're talking about, I mean, it almost sounds like planting the right things and clearing or something first could make something into it.
Yes. So when I go and I look at a property, if an area is, very clearly a historic hardwood forest or something to that effect, I'm not going to recommend, or a woodland or it's very mature and healthy and from a habitat standpoint as it's being a woodland or a forest. I will not recommend that landowner convert that to some type of prairie habitat. But it's oftentimes that they have some type of either edge habitat or they have early successional habitat that's not doing the greatest just because it's been left aside or it's been neglected or, the neighbor boy hazed it once a year or whatever it may be. There's unlimited amount of possibilities, or even sometimes there's more of a new growth forest that you can tell has grown up and is just way overgrown. Those we can pretty much always get to some type of grassland habitat ecosystems. And sometimes they wouldn't have even historically been, parts of these large grasslands, but because we know we've lost so much grasslands and because we know the science behind it, we can take the steps to set back succession and either go in there and open up the canopy again to get grass down to the grassland floor or turn a fescue field back into what would have been, a treeless prairie with some intermittent shrubs. So it varies quite a bit, but if we're looking at a healthy woodland or a healthy forest, we're not going to go in there and disrupt the entire ecosystem just to make it grassland.
Jeremy, there's a question from Sharon. Are there places where we can go to see where conversion to grasslands has been done?
Absolutely. So I'm more familiar with the places you can go in Tennessee. I don't know if Dwayne and Cooper could definitely chime in here too. Dunbar Cave has had a project on there. I think we're in year 3 or 4, where we've recreated a prairie on part of Dunbar Cave State Park's land. May Prairie down in Middle Tennessee as well. And there's a lot of different parks that you can go to. You can actually go onto SGI's website and there's a little tab there that says find a grassland near me or find a prairie near me, and you can put in your information there and we'll pull up the nearest prairies to your area so that you can go walk through these areas and see some of the biodiversity there and stuff like that. And Couchville Cedar Glade is another good one that's really interesting, but without having a map pulled up in front of me, my best bet would say go to SGI's website, pull up that find a prairie, put your information in, and then go have at it. Go enjoy a weekend walk and look at the flowers and the birds and the bees and be astounded as I am.
And Jeremy, this is Dwayne. I'll just add to what you said. So right now, the resource that Jeremy mentioned, the Find a Prairie near me, it is very clunky, and we're going to hope to improve upon that. So while it doesn't have a method yet of putting your zip code in and giving you the nearest one, what we are putting in are the publicly accessible grasslands along with the description. So that's in the process of being updated. But if you want to see sites that specifically have been converted back to grassland from some other pre-existing state where they used to be, I would say one of the best, hands down, is a place called Catoosa Wildlife Management Area up near Crossville, Tennessee. That's about 1,000 acres of oak savanna that's been restored. But Jeremy's right, Dunbar Cave is another great example as well.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. I'm just looking in the chat list to see, make sure we get all the questions answered. Jeremy, I don't know if you can see that window or not, but I'll go through it and make sure everything's covered. So again, from Sharon, as a farm owner, I would like to move away from raising cattle to having forests and grasslands. What are the first steps I need to take?
Are you in Tennessee or Kentucky?
Are you still there, Sharon? I don't know, but
well, if she's in Tennessee, I would say reach out to me, have me come out to her property, and we can make a detailed plan for all of her area. If she's in Kentucky, I'd say contact my counterpart, or contact me, and I can put you in contact with her, and we'll make you a detailed plan. We'll recommend cost share programs. We'll help you from start to finish on, creating some habitat on your property as opposed to grazing cattle.
Fantastic answer. Appreciate all those resources. Let's see. Dwayne has a comment about the find a grassland near you, similar to what he just said. Lots of compliments to you, Jeremy. From TJ, I see a majority of people in my purchase area of Western Kentucky mow their meadow this time of year, some for hay, but huge amounts of acreage just up there for aesthetic reasons. Is it better for pollinators, birds, etc., to mow later in the year? If so, any idea how to convince them to mow later in the year? Any programs working on this?
Yeah, there's tons of programs out there. When we're working within NRCS, so the Federal Farm Bill programs, you have to adhere to guidelines in order to receive subsidies and cost share through NRCS. We'll oftentimes look at fields and recommend some type of mowing when we're establishing habitat, or even haying and grazing organizations. We're making recommendations on when would be the best time to hay, to what length. We're always recommend never mow to a lower length than 12 inches. Generally, the ideal times, and it's different for every field, but August, so that the majority of your breeding birds are done, and there's still enough time for regrowth, because a lot of that habitat is where winter migrants and winter birds are going to take refuge. It's going to provide food in the form of seed. It's going to provide cover. So we don't want to be too late in the year, and we don't want to be too early, obviously. So it's kind of hitting that sweet spot, and every field is different because they're in different growing. You can look at one field in June, and it's going to look entirely different from a field that's 5 miles away. So we don't generally make those recommendations without seeing the field, but sometime in the later summer, we're still going to have enough growing before we start getting hard killing frost, so that we can have some habitat for winter, and also mowing at a height that we're not disrupting, and just entirely scalping the area.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. That answered several questions. There were a lot of questions about mowing, when to mow, how to get a breeding schedule to know that you're not doing harm. So all good stuff. TJ also says the Bobolink project in Vermont asks for donations that pays farmers to mow later. So that's an example of what they do in Vermont. And then from Sue, Ravenwood, it's the old Cornelia Fort Airport, New Greenway, right on the river. And Sharon's iPad is in Tennessee. When you were asking if it's Tennessee or Kentucky, she added to the chat there.
Awesome. So just grab my email from the page, shoot me an email, and I'll definitely get in touch with you, and we'll walk you through the process from start to finish.
Great. Couldn't have a better answer than that. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Jeremy. This was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it anytime.
Thank you.